That soft, rhythmic tapping against my bedroom window. 3 distinct knocks. Pause. Then 3 more. It's been happening every night since I moved into my grandmother's old farmhouse, always at exactly 3:17 a.m. I've checked outside countless times, but there's nothing there, just miles of empty fields stretching into darkness, and the ancient oak tree whose branches don't quite reach my second-story window. What makes it truly unsettling isn't just the sound itself, but the precision, the way each sequence of knocks is perfectly spaced, with exactly 7 seconds between each tap, as if keeping time to some unheard rhythm. Growing up in the city, I never understood the true meaning of isolation until I inherited this place after Gran passed. The nearest neighbor is 4 miles down a winding dirt road, and cell service is spotty at best. During the day, it's peaceful, idyllic even, with rolling hills and dense woods surrounding the 19th century farmhouse that's been in my family for generations. But at night, everything changes. The darkness here isn't like city darkness. It's absolute, consuming, and sometimes I swear it watches me. The shadows seem to move independently of their sources, stretching across the wooden floorboards like long, grasping fingers. The air itself feels different after sunset, heavier somehow, charged with an energy that makes the fine hairs on my arms stand on end. Last night, I woke not just to the tapping, but to the distinct sensation of being watched. As I lay paralyzed in bed, I could feel eyes on me from every corner of the room. Though when I finally gathered the courage to turn on my lamp, I was alone, or at least visibly alone. The feeling of presence remained, pressing against me like an invisible weight, and the temperature in the room had dropped so dramatically that my breath clouded in front of my face, despite it being the middle of summer. I moved here 6 weeks ago after burning out from my marketing job in Boston. Gran left me the property in her will, and the timing seemed perfect. A chance to write the novel I'd always dreamed of while reconnecting with my rural roots. The first week was blissful. I spent my days exploring the 15-acre property, cleaning out Gran's belongings, and setting up my writing space in the sun-drenched front room overlooking the apple orchard. The orchard itself is ancient, the trees gnarled and twisted with age, yet still producing the sweetest, tartest apples I've ever tasted. Gran used to say that the soil here was special, enriched by something she would never quite explain. "This land remembers," she'd say, cryptically, whenever I asked what made her apples so different from any others I'd eaten. Now, walking among those twisted trunks, I sometimes feel like they're watching me too, their branches reaching out a little too eagerly when the wind blows. The farmhouse itself is a sprawling 2-story structure with a wraparound porch and too many rooms for one person. Some still contain furniture draped in white sheets that I haven't had the heart to uncover. Gran's bedroom remains untouched. I chose to sleep in what was once my childhood room during summer visits. The house has all the quirks you'd expect from a building this old: creaking floorboards, doors that swing open unless properly latched, and windows that rattle even on still nights. But there's something else too, a sense of anticipation, as if the house itself has been waiting for me to return. The trouble started subtly. I'd place my coffee mug on the kitchen counter, only to find it in the sink moments later. Keys would disappear from hooks and reappear in drawers. I blamed my distraction, the adjustment to country living, or perhaps even Gran's elderly cat, Marmalade, who came with the house and regarded me with suspicious yellow eyes from whatever shadowy corner she occupied. But as the occurrences became more frequent, they also became harder to rationalize away. I'd wake to find all the kitchen chairs arranged in a perfect circle in the center of the room. The antique radio in the living room would turn itself on at odd hours, playing nothing but static, with occasional bursts of what sounded like children's laughter buried within the white noise. And most disturbing of all, I began finding small handprints in the dust of unused rooms, too small to be mine, with long, slender fingers that seemed disproportionate to the palm size. Marmalade's behavior became increasingly strange as well. She would stare intently at empty corners, her tail puffed up to twice its normal size. Sometimes she would arch her back and hiss at nothing I could see, backing away from invisible threats. Other times, I'd find her sitting perfectly still in front of the cellar door, as if standing guard. Gran had always said Marmalade was special, but I'd assumed she meant it in the way all pet owners think their animals have unique personalities. Now, I wasn't so sure. On day 10, I discovered the cellar door open. I distinctly remembered closing and latching it the previous evening after retrieving a jar of Gran's preserved peaches. The heavy wooden door, which required significant effort to lift, stood wide open, the darkness below seeming to breathe in the morning light. Marmalade sat at the threshold, fur bristling, emitting a low growl I'd never heard from her before. When I approached, she didn't move aside as she normally would. Instead, she placed herself more firmly in the doorway, her yellow eyes fixed not on me, but on something down in that darkness that I couldn't see. I tried to coax her away with treats, but she wouldn't budge. It was only when I moved to close the door myself that she finally darted away, though not before giving me a look that seemed almost warning. As I pulled the heavy door shut, I couldn't shake the impression that something down there had been about to emerge, something that had retreated back into the shadows only because I'd caught it in the act. Just the house settling, I told myself as I firmly closed the door and slid the iron bolt into place. Old farmhouses make strange noises. Everyone knows that. But why did the bolt look scratched, as if something had been trying to slide it open from the other side? That night, I heard the tapping for the first time. 3 distinct knocks. A pause, then 3 more. I bolted upright in bed, heart racing, as I fumbled for my phone to check the time. 3:17 a.m. exactly. Through the filmy curtains, the full moon cast long shadows across my bedroom floor. Shadows that seemed to shift and elongate in ways that didn't correspond with the swaying branches outside. "Hello," I called out, immediately feeling foolish. Who would be knocking on a second-story window in the middle of nowhere? I forced myself out of bed and approached the window cautiously, pulling aside the curtain with a trembling hand. Nothing but darkness and the distant tree line. The next morning, I examined the ground beneath my window. No footprints, no ladder marks, nothing to indicate anyone had been there. I told myself it must have been a bird, or perhaps a branch, from the nearby oak, though I knew it wasn't close enough to reach. Days passed, and I settled into a routine, writing in the mornings, tending to Gran's neglected garden in the afternoons, and reading her old books in the evenings. I discovered a collection of local history volumes and became fascinated by the area's past. The land where the farmhouse stood had once belonged to a religious sect in the late 1800s, a group that had apparently disappeared under mysterious circumstances. The books were frustratingly vague about what had happened, mentioning only that the entire congregation of 17 people vanished overnight, leaving meals half-eaten on tables and beds still warm. My curiosity piqued. I drove into town to visit the local historical society, housed in a small brick building that had once been the town's first schoolhouse. The elderly curator, Mr. Winters, seemed unsurprised by my interest in the property. "The Blackwood place," he said, nodding slowly. "Your grandmother was the only one who ever stayed there long-term after what happened with the Covenant." "The Covenant?" I asked. "That's what they called themselves. The Covenant of the Eternal Circle." He shuffled over to a filing cabinet and withdrew a thin folder. "Not much official record remains. Most of the town preferred to forget they ever existed." The folder contained newspaper clippings and a few faded photographs. One showed a group of people standing in front of what was unmistakably my grandmother's house, though the building looked newer, its paint fresh. 17 people, men, women, and children, all dressed in dark clothing with peculiar medallions around their necks. 3 concentric circles engraved on metal. They believed they were channeling something, Mr. Winters explained, his voice dropping to almost a whisper, though we were alone in the building. Something ancient that slept beneath the land. Their leader, Josiah Blackwood, claimed to have found texts describing rituals that could awaken this entity and bind it to their service. "And what happened to them?" I asked, though part of me already knew. Nobody knows for certain. A traveling salesman found the house empty in March of 1891. Authorities investigated, but found no signs of violence or struggle. It was as if they had simply walked away or been taken. He hesitated, then added, "The only clue was found in the cellar, a circle carved into the dirt floor, with strange symbols around the edge that no one could identify. And in the center," he trailed off. "In the center," I prompted, "a single medallion. Not like the others they wore. This one had symbols that made the sheriff's deputy physically ill to look at. He described it as wrong somehow, like the shapes hurt the eye. They locked it away in the town archives, but it disappeared a week later." Mr. Winters closed the folder and fixed me with a penetrating gaze. The property stood empty for decades. No one would buy it until your grandmother came along in '63. Local folks tried to warn her, but she was determined, said she had her reasons. "Did she ever mention what those reasons were?" I asked. He shook his head. "Your grandmother kept to herself mostly. But she did come in here once, maybe 20 years ago, asking about protection symbols, old folk magic to ward off evil. Said it was for a book she was researching." He paused. "I never saw any such book published." As I was leaving, he caught my arm. "Miss, if I may, have you been experiencing anything unusual at the house?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" "Noises, things moving, cold spots." His grip on my arm tightened slightly. "The knocking. Have you heard the knocking?" I felt the blood drained from my face. How did you know about that? He released my arm and stepped back. Because every owner before your grandmother reported the same thing. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. Always at the same time. He reached into his pocket and pressed something into my palm. A small cloth bag that smelled of herbs and something metallic. Keep this with you. And whatever you do, don't answer the knocking. Don't acknowledge it. And most importantly, don't go into the cellar at night. I drove back to the farmhouse with the cloth bag on the seat beside me, Mr. Winter's warning echoing in my mind. As I pulled up the long driveway, the setting sun cast long shadows across the property, and for the first time, the house didn't look welcoming. It looked like it was watching, waiting, hungry. The tapping continued every night, always at 3:17 a.m. precisely. I began to dread going to sleep, knowing I would jolt awake to that sound. Some nights I tried staying awake past that hour, but an unnatural heaviness would overcome me around 3 a.m., pulling me into a deep sleep from which I'd awake precisely at 3:17 to the sound of knocking. One night, I tried setting up my phone to record the window while I slept, hoping to catch whatever was causing the sound. The video ran normally until 3:15 a.m., when the image suddenly distorted, becoming grainy and unclear. At exactly 3:17, the audio picked up the knocking clearly. 3 distinct taps, pause, 3 more, but the video showed nothing at the window. Just as the final knock sounded, a dark shape moved across the frame, too quickly and too blurred to identify. When I played it back frame by frame, all I could make out was what looked like a thin, elongated hand with too many joints in the fingers. After that, I tried a different approach. I scattered flour on the outside windowsill, thinking it might capture footprints or marks from whatever was causing the tapping. The next morning, I found the flour undisturbed, except for 3 perfect circles pressed into it, each about the size of a quarter, arranged in a triangle pattern. They were too precise to be natural, too perfect to be made by any animal I could think of. When I touched one of the impressions, the flour was ice cold, despite the warm morning sun shining directly on the windowsill. My sleep became increasingly disturbed. On the rare nights when the tapping didn't wake me, I'd find myself dreaming of the cellar. In these dreams, I'd descend the stairs willingly, drawn by voices calling my name. At the bottom would be a circle of people holding hands, their faces obscured by shadows except for their eyes, which glowed faintly in the darkness. They would beckon me to join them, to complete their circle. The 17th, they would call me, the one we've been waiting for. I'd always wake just as I was about to step into the circle, my heart racing and my body drenched in cold sweat. After particularly bad nights, I'd find strange marks on my body, small bruises in sets of 3 that I couldn't explain, or long thin scratches on my back that I couldn't have possibly inflicted on myself. Twice, I woke to find dirt under my fingernails and on the soles of my feet, as if I'd been outside or in the cellar, though I had no memory of leaving my bed. During my 4th week, I began finding small arrangements of twigs on the porch each morning, 3 sticks laid parallel to each other, then 3 more crossing them. I disposed of them, telling myself they were the work of birds or the wind, but they reappeared daily, always in the exact same formation. Then came the whispers, so faint at first that I thought it was just the wind in the eaves or my imagination working overtime. But gradually, they became more distinct, unintelligible words spoken in hushed tones that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. They were loudest near the cellar door, which I now checked compulsively throughout the day to ensure it remained firmly closed and bolted. One evening, while cooking dinner, I heard what sounded like children laughing coming from the field behind the house. I stepped onto the back porch, squinting into the twilight. There, at the edge of the woods about 100 yards away, I saw them, 3 small figures, holding hands in a circle, spinning slowly. My breath caught. There were no families with children nearby, and these children seemed off somehow. Their movements were too fluid, too synchronized, and even from this distance, I could tell their clothing wasn't modern. I blinked, and they were gone. Just the wind rustling through the tall grass where they had stood. The incident left me deeply unsettled, but I tried to rationalize it. A trick of the light, my imagination working overtime after all the strange occurrences and historical research. Still, something compelled me to walk out to that spot the next morning. The grass where the children had been spinning was flattened in a perfect circle, about 6 feet in diameter. At the center lay a small, weathered toy, a wooden doll with no face, just smooth, worn wood where features should have been. Its clothes were handmade, the fabric so old it practically disintegrated at my touch, but I could make out the same medallion symbol that had been in the Historical Society photographs. 3 concentric circles, carefully embroidered on what's remained of the doll's dress. Despite my better judgment, I brought the doll back to the house. Marmalade hissed and fled the room as soon as I entered with it, refusing to come near me until I placed the doll in a shoebox and put it on a high shelf in the spare bedroom closet. Even then, she would sit outside that room, watching the door as if expecting something to emerge at any moment. That night, I dreamed of children playing in my room. I could hear their whispers and giggles, feel the slight depression on the mattress, as if someone small had climbed onto the bed. I woke to find the doll sitting on my chest, staring at me with its blank face just inches from mine. Gasping, I flung it across the room, where it hit the wall with a hollow thud. As I sat trembling, trying to catch my breath, I distinctly heard a child's voice whisper from the corner where the doll had landed, "Why won't you play with us, Ellie? We've been so lonely." When I turned on the light, the doll was gone. I spent the rest of the night in the living room with all the lights on, Marmalade curled protectively on my lap. In the morning, I searched the entire house, but couldn't find the doll anywhere. It wasn't until 3 days later that I discovered it back in the field, exactly where I had originally found it, as if it had returned home on its own. That night, I called my cousin Rachel, the only family member who had spent significant time at the farmhouse growing up. "Hey, did you ever experience anything strange at Grant's place?" I asked hesitantly, not wanting to sound crazy. The pause on the other end lasted just a beat too long. "What do you mean by strange?" "I don't know. Noises, things moving around on their own, that sort of thing." Another pause. "There's something you should know about the farmhouse, Ellie. Something Gran made us promise never to tell you." because she knew you'd inherit the place someday, and she didn't want to scare you away. My blood ran cold. Tell me, when Gran was young, before she even bought the property, there was an incident. The family who lived there before, they were found. Rachel's voice dropped to a whisper. They were found in the cellar, all 17 of them. They'd sealed themselves in and, well, no one knows exactly what happened, but they all died down there. The police report said they'd arranged themselves in a circle, holding hands with strange markings carved into the dirt floor. 17 people, the same number as the religious sect that had disappeared. Gran never told me this, I said, my voice shaking. She wouldn't. She loved that house despite its history. But Ellie, there's more. The family was found on March the 17th, and the police report noted the time of death as approximately 3:15 a.m. I nearly dropped the phone. March 17th, 3:17. The same as the time I heard the knocking each night. Did Gran ever experience anything unusual in the house? I managed to ask. She never spoke about it directly, Rachel replied, but she had rules. Never open the cellar after dark. Never remove the salt lines she kept at every threshold. And never, ever acknowledge the knocking. What knocking? I whispered, though I already knew. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. Gran said, as long as you don't answer, as long as you don't let them know you can hear them, you'll be safe. But I had called out that first night. I had acknowledged the knocking, as if reading my thoughts. Rachel continued urgently, Ellie, if you've heard it, if you've answered it, you need to leave that house. Now. Tonight. Don't pack. Don't wait until morning. Just get in your car and... The call dropped suddenly. My phone displaying no service, where the signal bars should be. I tried redialing, but couldn't connect. That's when I noticed how quiet the house had become. The usual creaks and settling noises had ceased completely. Even Marmalade, who should have been prowling around, demanding her evening meal, was nowhere to be seen. The silence pressed against my eardrums like a physical presence. Then I heard it. The sound of the cellar door opening, the slow creak of ancient hinges, the heavy scrape of wood against wood. But that was impossible. I had checked the bolt just an hour ago. It had been securely fastened. I stood frozen in the kitchen, listening as something began to ascend the cellar steps. The wood groaned under weight, each footfall deliberate and unhurried. Whatever was coming up knew I wasn't going anywhere. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs and paused at the closed kitchen door that separated the cellar entrance from the main house. I watched in horror as the knob began to turn slowly, and then came the knocking. Not from my bedroom window this time, but from the kitchen door, just feet away from where I stood. 3 distinct knocks. Pause. 3 more. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed, and I turned to look at it with a surreal sense of detachment. It was 3:17 a.m., but that was impossible. It had been a barely 9 p.m. when I called Rachel. Somehow, hours had passed in what felt like minutes. The knocking came again, more insistent this time. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. And then a voice, a child's voice, sweet and clear, called from the other side of the door. We've been waiting for you, Ellie, for so long. Won't you please let us in? How did it know my name? Your grandmother kept us out for decades," the voice continued, its childlike quality slipping to reveal something ancient beneath. "But you opened the way when you answered our call, and now the circle of 17 can be complete again." I stood frozen, unable to move as the voice continued, now joined by others, a chorus of children's voices, all speaking in perfect unison, their words overlapping in a hypnotic rhythm. "She knew the price, your grandmother. A blood offering every 17 years. A sacrifice to keep us bound. But she's gone now, and the covenant is broken. The circle must be completed." My mind raced. Gran had lived here for 68 years. Exactly 4 cycles of 17. Had she been keeping something at bay all this time? Making some kind of payment or sacrifice to protect herself and perhaps others? I remembered Mr. Winters' words about the protection symbols she had asked, about the salt lines Rachel mentioned. "What do you want from me?" I managed to whisper, my voice barely audible, even to my own ears. The chorus of voices replied with a sound that was almost like laughter, but layered with something darker, predatory. "Want? We don't want anything from you, Ellie. We want you, your place in the circle, your essence to complete what was started in 1891, the 17th sacrifice." "I'm not going to sacrifice myself to you," I said, finding strength in my fear and anger. "Whatever you are, whatever deal my grandmother made, I'm not part of it." The voices hissed in unison, a sound like steam escaping from a dozen kettles at once. "You have her blood. You answered our call. The choice was made when you first spoke to us, when you first acknowledged our presence. The only question now is whether you come willingly or we take you by force when the moon reaches its zenith." The knob turned fully, and the door began to open, revealing nothing but impenetrable darkness beyond. And from that darkness emerged not a child, but a hand, withered, gray, with elongated fingers, ending in sharp points that looked more like talons than human nails. I should have run. Every instinct screamed at me to flee, but my feet felt rooted to the floor, my body no longer my own to command. The door swung wider, and I caught a glimpse of what stood beyond. Not one figure, but many, their forms shifting and blending together like smoke. Their faces were simultaneously young and impossibly old, with eyes that reflected no light. "Join us, Ellie," they whispered in unison. "The 17th place in the circle has been waiting for you." Behind them, I could see the cellar steps descending into blackness, and at the bottom, a faint glow illuminated what looked like markings carved into the dirt floor. The same circle Rachel had described. The figures began to advance, their movements fluid and unnatural, like puppets controlled by unseen strings. As they entered the kitchen, the lights flickered and dimmed, and the temperature plummeted until I could see my breath clouding in front of me. I felt a presence behind me and spun around to find Marmalade standing in the doorway to the living room, her back arched, fur standing on end, but her eyes weren't fixed on the approaching figures. She was staring at something behind me, something above the cellar door that I couldn't see. Following her gaze, I looked up and felt my heart nearly stop. There, barely visible in the dimming light, was a symbol carved into the wooden lintel above the door. 3 parallel lines crossed by 3 more, the same pattern as the twig arrangements I'd been finding. One of the figures reached for me, its cold fingers brushing against my arm. The touch sent a jolt of ice through my veins, and suddenly I could move again. I stumbled backward, away from their grasp. "No," I said, my voice stronger than I expected. "This isn't your home anymore." Something flickered across their collective faces. Surprise, perhaps, or anger. The leader, the one who had spoken with a child's voice, tilted its head at an impossible angle. "We were here long before your family," it said. "Long before the house. The land remembers us. The earth beneath holds our covenant. My grandmother kept you out," I replied, edging toward the living room where my car keys lay on the side table. "For decades, so I can too." The figure smiled, revealing teeth that were too numerous and too sharp to be human. "Your grandmother knew the old ways. She paid the price willingly. What are you willing to sacrifice, Ellie? What will you give to keep us at bay for another lifetime?" Before I could answer, Marmalade shot forward with a yowl that sounded almost human in its fury. She launched herself at the leader, claws extended. The figures recoiled, their forms momentarily dispersing like mist before a strong wind. I seized the moment, grabbing my keys and phone, and ran for the front door. Behind me, I heard unearthly shrieks and the sound of breaking glass. I didn't look back as I threw myself into my car and jammed the key into the ignition. The engine sputtered, but wouldn't catch. Of course it wouldn't. Nothing could be that easy. Through the rearview mirror, I saw the front door of the farmhouse swing open. The figures stood in the doorway, their forms silhouetted against the dim light from within. They didn't pursue me, but instead formed a semicircle on the porch, watching, waiting. I tried the engine again, pumping the gas pedal desperately. With a shuddering cough, it finally turned over. I slammed the car into reverse and peeled down the gravel driveway, rocks pinging against the undercarriage. As I reached the end of the drive and turned onto the main road, I glanced back one last time. The farmhouse stood dark now, no lights visible in any window. But there on the front porch, clearly illuminated by the moonlight, were 17 figures arranged in a perfect circle. And in the center of that circle sat Marmalade, looking directly at me, her yellow eyes reflecting the moonlight like tiny beacons. I drove through the night, not stopping until I reached the outskirts of the nearest town as dawn was breaking. I checked into a motel, fell onto the bed fully clothed, and slept for 12 dreamless hours. When I woke, I had 17 missed calls from an unknown number. No voicemails, no texts, just 17 calls that had come in at precisely 3-minute intervals. I've been at this motel for 3 days now, trying to make sense of what happened. I've researched the history of the farmhouse, finding newspaper articles about the mass suicide in 1891 and the strange disappearance of the family in 1954. But there's little information about my grandmother's purchase of the property in the 1960s or what price she might have paid to keep whatever dwells there at bay. As I dig deeper, certain patterns begin to emerge. Every 17 years since 1891, there have been disappearances in the county, never more than 1 or 2 people, often dismissed as runaways or accidents, but they always occurred in March, always around the 17th day. The most recent would have been in 2023, which would align with Gran's death in January of that year. Had she been the sacrifice that time? Had she known her time was coming and accepted it? Or had whatever entities dwelled in the house taken her regardless? The thought makes my blood run cold. If Gran had been making sacrifices to keep whatever was in that house contained, what would happen now that the cycle was broken? Would it remain focused on me, or would it seek others to complete its circle? And if this pattern had been continuing for over a century, how many others had been taken before? I found an old journal in my suitcase that I don't remember packing. One of Gran's, its leather cover worn soft with age and use. Most of the entries are mundane, daily observations about farm life, but scattered throughout are cryptic references to maintaining the boundary and feeding the circle. Every 17 years, there's a gap in the entries for the entire month of March, followed by a single entry in April that simply reads, "It is done. 17 more years of peace." The final entry, dated just days before her death, chills me. The circle grows hungry. I can feel them testing the boundaries. My time approaches, but I fear it won't be enough this time. They want more than just me. They want to complete what was started. Ellie must never return here after I'm gone. The house must be burned to cleanse the land. I've made arrangements, but if you're reading this, my dear granddaughter, it means something has gone wrong. Forgive me for bringing you into this. Forgive me for not being strong enough to end it once and for all. I know I should never go back. That would be the sensible thing. Sell the property without ever setting foot on it again. Burn it to the ground as Gran intended. But I keep thinking about Marmalade, still there among those things, and about the cellar with its circle carved into the earth. What lies beneath that circle? What covenant was made with the land itself? If Gran couldn't end it, despite knowing what was coming, how could I possibly hope to? The journal has other entries that mention protective measures: salt circles, iron nails driven into door frames, certain herbs burned at threshold points. Gran had been containing whatever was in that house, not just appeasing it. Perhaps there was a way to banish it permanently, to break the cycle rather than continue it. I've also found references in local folklore to similar entities, beings that feed on fear and life essence, that require periodic sacrifices to remain bound to specific locations. Some stories speak of ancient rituals that can sever their connection to our world, sending them back to whatever dark dimension spawned them. But such rituals are dangerous, requiring perfect execution and often a sacrifice of their own. Most of all, I think about what the entity said, that my grandmother knew the old ways. Did she leave any clues, any guidance for how to deal with what lives in that house? The rational part of my mind says to walk away, but something deeper, something connected to that land through generations of my family, pulls me back. The cloth bag Mr. Winters gave me still sits on the passenger seat of my car. I haven't opened it, but sometimes I catch it moving slightly from the corner of my eye, as if whatever is inside is slowly awakening. Once, I swear I heard it whisper my grandmother's name. I called Rachel again yesterday, but the line went dead as soon as she answered. When I tried calling back, her number had been disconnected. I tried her husband's phone, then her work number, but got the same result each time. It's as if she's been systematically erased from the communications network, or as if something doesn't want me to speak with her again. Last night, I dreamed of the farmhouse. In the dream, I descended the cellar steps willingly, a book of my grandmother's tucked under my arm. The 17 figures formed their circle around me, but they couldn't approach. In the center of the circle was a smaller ring of salt, and within it, I sat cross-legged, reading aloud from Gran's book words in a language I didn't understand, but somehow knew. The entities hissed and writhed as I spoke, their forms becoming less substantial with each word, as if they were being unmade. But as they faded, I could feel something else awakening beneath me, something far older and more powerful than these 17 bound spirits. The dirt floor of the cellar began to crack, revealing a pulsing red light from deep below, and a low, rhythmic sound, like a massive heartbeat, filled the air. "You don't understand what you're doing," one of the fading entities cried out, its voice no longer bearing any resemblance to a child's. "We are the barrier. We are the seal. If you banish us, you'll free what lies beneath." I woke with the taste of salt on my lips and the certainty that there was unfinished business waiting for me at the farmhouse. The dream had revealed something crucial. These entities, whatever they were, weren't the primary threat. They were guardians of some kind, bound to the property to contain something worse. My grandmother hadn't been sacrificing to appease them. She had been reinforcing their binding to maintain the greater seal. The realization sends ice through my veins. If I walk away now, if I break the cycle completely, whatever lies beneath might eventually break free without the 17 to contain it. But if I return and become the 17th as they want, I'll be trapped there for eternity, part of the binding circle. There has to be another way. Something Gran knew, but couldn't implement herself. Something in her journal or her books that could provide a permanent solution. My phone chimed with a text message. Unknown number. The message contained just 7 words. "The circle needs you. Come home, Ellie." Moments later, another text arrived. Not to join. To end it. The second message was from a different unknown number, but somehow I knew it was from Marmalade, or whatever was working through her. Gran had called her special for a reason. A third text arrived as I was pondering this. An image this time. A page from one of Gran's books showing a complex ritual diagram. At the center was the same circle I'd seen in my dreams. But surrounding it were 17 smaller circles, each containing a different symbol. Handwritten notes in Gran's familiar script explained that the ritual required a willing descendant of blood at the moment when the cycles align. According to a calendar notation at the bottom of the page, that alignment would occur today at 3:17 p.m., exactly 17 days after I first heard the knocking. I've packed my bag and checked out of the motel. I'm sitting in my car now, keys in the ignition, torn between driving away forever or returning to face whatever awaits me in that cellar. I don't know if I can trust the second message or if it's just another trick to lure me back. All I know is that something has been building toward this moment for over a century, and somehow I'm the key to either maintaining the cycle or breaking it once and for all. The dashboard clock reads 3:14 p.m. I have 3 minutes to decide. My hand hovers over the ignition. If I turn the key now, I could be miles away before the alignment occurs. I could leave this all behind, sell the property from a distance, never set foot on that cursed land again. But the images from my dream flash through my mind. The pulsing red light beneath the cellar floor, the massive heartbeat that seemed to shake the very foundations of the house. If what I sensed is true, walking away might condemn countless others to whatever fate awaits when the greater seal finally breaks. With trembling fingers, I reach for Gran's journal instead of the keys, flipping to the final pages I hadn't fully read. There, in handwriting that grows increasingly shaky, is what appears to be her final plan. The binding weakens with each cycle. The 17 are no longer enough to contain what lies beneath. I've searched for another way, a permanent solution, and finally found references in texts so old they crumble at my touch. The ritual of severance can break the connection between our world and theirs, but it requires blood of the original bloodline, Blackwood blood, freely given at the moment when the cycles align. My time is ending, but Ellie may yet have a chance if she returns. God forgive me for what I've set in motion, but there was no other way. My grandmother was a Blackwood descendant, which means I am too. The original covenant wasn't just with the religious sect, it was with the Blackwood family specifically. Pieces click into place. Why Gran bought the property when no one else would. Why she spent her life maintaining the bindings. Why the entities know my name. The clock reads 3:15 p.m. now. If I'm going to do this, I need to leave immediately to reach the farmhouse in time. I start the car and speed down the highway, pushing well above the limit on the empty country roads. The cloth bag from Mr. Winters sits beside me, and now I open it, spilling its contents onto the passenger seat. Inside are a small vial of salt, a rusted iron nail, and a folded paper containing dried herbs that smell of sage and something metallic. A note in spidery handwriting reads, "The 3 barriers, earth, metal, and spirit. Use them at the threshold." As I approach the turnoff to the farmhouse, dark clouds gather overhead, though the weather forecast had predicted clear skies all week. The air feels charged, like the moments before a lightning strike. I can almost hear a faint humming, growing louder as I near the property. The farmhouse comes into view as I round the final bend. It looks different somehow. Older, more decrepit, as if it's aged decades in the few days I've been gone. The white paint is peeling in long strips, exposing graying wood beneath. The windows are dark, some cracked or broken, and on the front porch stand 17 figures, arranged in a perfect semicircle, facing the driveway as if they've been awaiting my arrival. I bring the car to a stop at the foot of the drive, still far enough away to flee if needed. Through the windshield, I can see the figures more clearly now. Men, women, and children of various ages, all wearing the same dark clothing I saw in the historical society photograph. Their faces are gaunt, eyes sunken and dark, and they move with that same unsettling fluidity I noticed in the children at the forest's edge. At the center of the semicircle sits Marmalade, her yellow eyes fixed directly on me. Unlike the spectral figures, she looks solid, real, a tether to this world among these things that don't quite belong in it. As I watch, she rises and walks deliberately to the edge of the porch, then sits again, as if beckoning me forward. The dashboard clock flips to 3:16 p.m. 1 minute remaining. It's now or never. I gather the items from Mr. Winters, stuffing them into my pockets. I grab Gran's journal and the ritual page that was texted to me. Then, heart pounding so hard I can feel it in my throat, I step out of the car. The air is different on the property, heavier, charged with an energy that makes the fine hairs on arms stand on end. Each step toward the house feels like wading through invisible molasses, as if the very atmosphere resists my approach. The figures on the porch remain motionless, but I can feel their attention on me like a physical weight. When I reach the bottom of the porch steps, Marmalade meows, a sound so normal and mundane that it breaks the tension momentarily. She turns and walks to the front door, which swings open at her approach. The spectral figures part to create a path, their movements synchronized as if they're connected by invisible strings. "You've returned," they say in unison, their voices layering over each other in that unsettling chorus. The 17th, the final piece. The circle will be complete. "I'm not here to join your circle," I say, surprised at the steadiness in my voice. "I'm here to end it, to break the covenant once and for all." A ripple of what might be fear passes through the assembled entities. They exchange glances, their forms seeming to waver slightly, becoming less substantial. "You cannot," they say, but there's uncertainty in their collective voice now. The binding must be maintained. What lies beneath must not awaken. "There's another way," I tell them, holding up the ritual page, "a way to sever the connection permanently." The leader steps forward, a tall figure who must once have been Josiah Blackwood. Up close, his appearance is even more disturbing. His skin has a translucent quality, and beneath it, I can see not bones or organs, but swirling darkness, as if he's a shell filled with living shadow. "The ritual of severance," he says, his voice now separate from the others, deeper and more resonant. "We know of it. It has been attempted before. The price is too high." "What price?" I ask, though part of me already knows. "A willing sacrifice of Blackwood blood," he replies, "not to join us, but to unmake us, to sever not just our connection to this world, but to any world, oblivion, complete and eternal." I realize now what my grandmother had intended. She had discovered this ritual, but hadn't been able to perform it in time before her natural death. Instead, she had arranged for me to inherit the property, knowing I would investigate, knowing I would eventually be drawn back here to complete what she started. "And what happens to the sacrifice?" I ask, though again, I sense the answer. Josiah's expression might almost be pity. The caster becomes the new seal, not bound to the circle as we are, but bound to the land itself, a guardian for as long as the bloodline continues. Behind him, I can see the other entities growing increasingly agitated, their forms flickering like bad television reception. They clearly don't want me to pursue this course. My phone buzzes in my pocket. 3:17 p.m. The alignment has begun. I feel it immediately, a shift in the air, a deepening of that heavy pressure. The ground beneath my feet trembles slightly, and from somewhere deep below comes a sound like a massive indrawn breath. The entities around me seem suddenly more substantial, more present, as if the alignment has strengthened their connection to this world. Take me to the cellar, I say to Josiah, clutching Grant's journal to my chest. Now. He hesitates, then nods once. The other entities part as he leads me through the front door and into the house. Inside, everything is exactly as I left it, yet somehow different. Shadows longer and darker, colors leached away, as if the house itself is being pulled into some other dimension. Marmalade follows, close at my heels, as we approach the cellar door. It stands open already, darkness yawning beyond. The air that wafts up from below is cold and carries a strange, metallic scent. Are you certain of this path? Josiah asks, pausing at the threshold. Once begun, it cannot be undone. Join us instead. The Circle of 17. It is the safer way. I think of Gran, spending her life maintaining a temporary solution, knowing it would eventually fail. I think of the cycles of disappearances every 17 years, lives taken to feed the binding, and I think of whatever lies beneath, growing stronger with each cycle, testing its bonds. I'm sure, I say, and step past him onto the cellar stairs. The wooden steps creak ominously as I descend. Gran's journal clutched in one hand, the ritual page in the other. The darkness below seems to swallow the light from the doorway, but as my eyes adjust, I can make out the cellar floor and the circle carved into the packed earth, exactly as I've seen in my dreams. The entities follow, floating down rather than stepping, their forms growing more distinct as they near the circle. I can see their medallions now, glowing with a faint blue light. The 3 concentric circles pulsing in time with that deep, rhythmic sound from below. At the bottom of the stairs, I pause, taking in the scene. The circle is approximately 12 feet in diameter, its edge deeply carved into the dirt floor. Around its perimeter are 17 smaller circles, each containing symbols I don't recognize but somehow understand. Binding symbols meant to channel and contain energy. In the center of the main circle is a depression about 3 feet across, and within it, something gleams dully in the dim light. I approach cautiously and see that it's a medallion much larger than those worn by the entities, a disc of some black metal that seems to absorb rather than reflect light. The 3 concentric circles on its surface aren't engraved, but seem to be openings, revealing something moving beneath, something that hurts my eyes to look at directly. The focus point, Josiah says, from just behind me, the anchor of the binding. The other entities have arranged themselves around the perimeter of the room, each standing before one of the smaller circles. Marmalade sits at the edge of the main circle, watching me intently. The ritual must be performed from within the center, Josiah continues. But be warned, once you step into the circle, you will feel its pull. The entity below will sense your presence and your intent. It will resist. I take a deep breath and remove the items from Mr. Winters from my pockets, the salt, the iron nail, and the herbs. According to Gran's notes, These will provide temporary protection while I perform the ritual. The salt I pour in a small circle around the central depression, the nail I hold in my left hand, and the herbs I crush between my fingers, their pungent scent filling the air. Whatever happens, I say to Marmalade, whatever you see or hear, don't interfere until it's done. She blinks slowly, a distinctly uncat-like intelligence in her yellow eyes. I'm no longer convinced she's just a cat. Perhaps never was. Another guardian my grandmother left to help me? With the ritual page in one hand and the iron nail in the other, I step over the salt circle and into the central depression. Immediately, I feel it, a powerful pull downward, as if gravity has intensified tenfold around me. The medallion at my feet grows warmer, the movement beneath its surface more agitated, and then the voice comes, not from the entities around the room, but from below, from everywhere and nowhere at once. A voice so deep it's felt more than heard, vibrating in my bones and teeth. Blackwood blood, it rumbles. At last, I force myself to focus on the ritual page, on Gran's carefully transcribed words. The language is unfamiliar, but somehow the pronunciation comes naturally to my tongue, as if the knowledge was always there, buried in my DNA. As I begin the incantation, the entities around the room grow agitated, their forms flickering more rapidly. The medallion at my feet begins to pulse with a red light that shines upward through the concentric circles, casting strange, shifting shadows on the cellar ceiling. The pulling sensation intensifies, and I have to brace myself to remain standing. The voice from below grows angrier, the words indistinct, but the sentiment clear. Rage, hunger, and ancient frustration. The binding weakens. It booms. I will be free. The ground beneath my feet begins to crack, thin fissures spreading outward from the medallion like a spider web. Through them, I can see pulsing red light and what appears to be movement, something vast shifting far below. I continue the ritual, my voice growing stronger as I near the final words. The entities around the room are in clear distress now, their forms stretching and contorting as if being pulled in multiple directions. Josiah stands closest to the circle, his expression torn between hope and fear. What you begin cannot be undone, the voice below warns. The price is eternity. I falter momentarily, the full weight of what I'm undertaking hitting me. If I complete this ritual, I'll be bound to this land forever, not as one of the circle, but as something else, the new seal, the guardian of whatever lies beneath. But what's the alternative? Continue the cycle of sacrifice every 17 years? Allow whatever is below to eventually break free when the current binding inevitably fails? I make my choice and speak the final words of the ritual, my voice ringing with conviction in the small cellar room. For a moment, nothing happens. Then the medallion at my feet shatters, fragments of black metal flying outward, only to disintegrate into dust before they hit the ground. A blinding column of red light erupts from where it lay, engulfing me completely. The pain is immediate and overwhelming, not physical, but something deeper, as if every cell in my body is being rewritten. I can feel something flowing out of me, not blood, but essence, life force, flowing down through the broken earth beneath my feet, and simultaneously, something else flows upward into me, something ancient and powerful, but not malevolent as I'd feared. Knowledge, understanding, I see it all now. The original covenant made by Josiah Blackwood, not with demons as I'd assumed, but with something far older, land spirits, guardian entities that had dwelt in this place since before humans walked the earth. Blackwood had sought to bind them, to use their power for his own purposes, not understanding what he was dealing with. The ritual had gone wrong, transforming him and his followers into the half-entities they now were, bound to the circle, but also to something far worse that their failed ritual had partially awakened. What lies beneath is not one entity, but many. The collective consciousness of a world that existed before ours, pressing against the thin membrane between dimensions, seeking entry. The 17 bound souls have been holding it back, their circular formation creating a seal, but at the cost of periodic sacrifices to maintain their strength. The ritual I'm completing now isn't severing a demonic bond. It's restoring balance, returning the land guardians to their proper role, while creating a new type of seal, one that draws strength not from sacrifice, but from the willing stewardship of the land itself. Around the room, the spectral entities begin to change. Their forms grow less humanoid, more elemental, becoming swirling patterns of light and shadow. They're reverting to their original nature, freed from the corrupted binding Blackwood imposed. Josiah himself is the last to transform. He approaches the edge of the circle, his form already beginning to dissolve. "We were wrong," he says, his voice distant and fading. "We sought to control what should have been revered. The price of that arrogance has been centuries of torment." He looks at me with what might be gratitude. "You have freed us, but bound yourself. Are you prepared for what comes next?" Before I can answer, the transformation completes. The spectral entities dissolve completely, their essence absorbed into the swirling light surrounding me. The pressure from below subsides, not gone, but contained, redirected. As the light recedes, I find myself standing alone in the cellar. Alone, except for Marmalade, who sits calmly at the edge of where the circle had been. The carved markings are gone, the earth smooth, as if freshly packed. Where the medallion had been is now a small sapling, its leaves a silvery green that seems to glow faintly in the dim light. I feel different, not damaged or diminished, as I'd feared, but changed, connected to the land in a way I can't fully articulate. I can sense the boundaries of the property as if they're extensions of my own body. I can feel the rhythms of the earth beneath, the air above, the water running deep below, and I can sense the thin places, the vulnerabilities where what lies beneath might try to push through, if not properly tended. I understand now what my grandmother was, not a prisoner or victim, but a guardian, a steward. And now that role has passed to me. Marmalade rises and stretches, then looks up at me expectantly. "Well," I say, my voice sounding strange in the quiet cellar. "I guess we have work to do." As I climb the cellar stairs, the farmhouse feels different, lighter somehow, as if a long-held breath has finally been released. The oppressive atmosphere is gone, replaced by something more neutral, not exactly welcoming, but not malevolent either. This is now my domain to shape, to guard. Outside, the storm clouds have dispersed, and late afternoon sunlight slants across the property. The land looks different to my new senses, alive in ways I never noticed before. Patterns of energy flowing through soil and trees, connecting everything. I know my life has irrevocably changed. I won't be able to leave this land for long, if at all. My role as guardian will define the rest of my existence, however long that might be. But looking out over the fields and forests that now pulse with visible energy to my altered perception, I feel a sense of purpose I've never known before. Marmalade weaves between my legs, then pads toward the apple orchard, glancing back as if to say, "Are you coming?" I follow, feeling the land respond to each step I take, adjusting and aligning itself to its new guardian. There will be challenges ahead, learning to use my new connection to the land, understanding the rhythms of the barriers I must maintain, perhaps even finding a way to eventually pass this stewardship to another willing descendant so the cycle isn't broken again. But for now, as the sun sets over my grandmother's farm, my farm now, I feel a strange peace settling over me. This is where I belong. This is what I was meant for. The circle is broken, but something new has taken its place. Something I hope better, but better.